there will be no real non-controlled currency in the world.
We're coming for you, banks.
And this is exactly what these Bitcoin Cash people are building.
Shout out to the Dragon Riders and the House of the Dragon.
Because it's a completely different situation than it was 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, that's how frogs can't boil. And they added a bunch of new opcodes, and they're doing a bunch of things over there.
It will be the most hated rally ever because a lot of people from some propaganda hate Bitcoin Cash.
Hello and welcome back to the Bitcoin Cash podcast, following Bitcoin Cash on its rise to global reserve currency. This is the podcast special episode number 173, live from the Isle of Man with guest host Gareth. Today is Saturday, the 7th of February, 2026. I'm your host, Jeremy. Gareth?
Hello, and I'm the co-host just for today's special, coming live from the Isle of Man. So, Jeremy, before we go any further, I think maybe you should explain to the regular viewers what's going on, because I won the prize. Do you want to tell them what happened? How I'm here?
Yes. So when we were at Bliss last year, Bliss 2025, we had a raffle during which we gave away decks of cards and some merchandise. Some people actually got BCH branded poker kit, which I heard was very popular later. But the grand prize was to join an episode of the podcast and actually host it. So full ability to customize what was the content, how we did the stream, everything like that. And Gareth won, actually. So this episode has been co-produced by Gareth. It's all under his creative direction, and he will be taking it from here. Take it away, Gareth.
Thank you. But before we go any further, none of this would be possible without Jet producing, of course. So, Jet, thanks for all the prep work and for putting up with my many pivots. There's been loads of ideas I had as to what to do with this, on what this episode was going to be. Now kind of apologies to the regular listeners that we'll be missing some of the regular features. But I'm hoping this targeted more for people who are new to Bitcoin Cash and crypto may still be of interest to you. So a warm welcome to anyone here, anyone listening from the Isle of Man. I've been putting it about a bit and seeing who we've got. And this episode is primarily for you, introducing you to what Bitcoin Cash is all about and to what peer-to-peer digital cash can do for you. And straight off the bat, we're going to start by going live on a cash drop. So we'll tell you more about it in a moment, but for the tech savvy on the island who've already figured it out and have your Purely Peer app installed and are waiting to go find the drops. So Jeremy, do you want to do the countdown for us?
Let's go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Cash drop.
Create, proceed. There we go.
Well,
and that looks like it should be live now. So if you go to your Purely Peer, you will, and you're on the island, there might be one just outside your front doorstep. So, we'll be popping in every now and again all the way through. But before that, Jeremy, for those who have no idea what we're talking about with the Purely Peer, I guess now would be a good idea to explain what it is.
Yes, so Purely Peer is an app developed by Paytaka, who are one of the great stalwarts of the BCH ecosystem. They also make a wallet app and merchant tooling and a lot of other stuff. And they're founded and focused in the Philippines, but they've made this app Purely Peer, which is a geocaching game. So people are familiar with Pokemon Go, was a big craze several years ago, where you can explore around in the real world, and using your app, you can come across, treasures and quests and things like that, right? So Purely Peer is a Bitcoin Cash focused version of the same concept. So it allows people to explore the real world and have fun as just an exploratory game, get outside, get some exercise, but also pick up these drops of BCH. So you can actually earn real money just by running around playing this game. Now, that provides a secondary function, which is that it also helps merchants who are accepting Bitcoin Cash, because either the merchants who are in the same area or other entities in the Bitcoin Cash space, for instance, the BCH podcast, who want to advertise, can fund these drops in a locality where they want to promote adoption. So it also serves as a vehicle to distribute BCH to new people and generate interest in an area, because people who will come to find those cash drops then, of course, will think, where can I spend this? And of course, the local merchants that have funded the drops will then be the first ones that they'll go to check it out. So it helps to create community connections at the same time. So that's the brief summary, I guess, of Purely Peer.
Yep. And there are, over the island, all in accessible places, 65 drops of 0.015 BCH, which is around £5-6. So it's something. But so the drops are live. Let's leave that running. Before we dive in, let me give you a quick overview of what we're covering today. So I'm going to start by sharing the story of how I got interested in all this, long before Bitcoin even existed, and why I think it matters. So has become, this is what it was created for, and why Bitcoin Cash is different. We'll cover the basics of self-custody, wallets, not accounts, and what you need to know to keep your BCH safe. Then we've got pre-recorded interviews with two people behind two successful BCH communities, one in the Philippines and one in Australia. We'll check in on the cash drop occasionally, as I said. We'll hear from Jeremy and Jet, and we'll finish up with how you can get involved here on the Isle of Man. Sound good? Let's go. So Jeremy, you start every show talking about Bitcoin Cash becoming a global reserve currency. And I want to unpack that a bit, because I think about it a bit differently. So my story that brought me to Bitcoin started long before Bitcoin. As a band member, as a band, we traveled, and we found ourselves in 1996 in the Khartoum International Music Festival, Khartoum, Sudan, the capital of Sudan. And a phenomenal experience. People were special, lots that were good. And one of the things was the British Council that had paid for us to go. And they'd given us a Land Rover and a driver to take us to our gigs, but also to the market, to sightseeing, to see where the Blue and the Red Nile meet. And we got to know our driver. And one day, the driver says to me, I hope I get paid before the army this month, because if I get paid before the army, I can keep my son and my daughter in school. But if the army gets paid before me, the school fees will double, so I will have to take my daughter out of school for a month. And I was like, what? How does that work? And he said, well, because the government of Sudan doesn't have money to pay the army, it just prints it. And I knew already that this was a crazy hyperinflationary country, because I was paying a bundle like this for a bag of peanuts from someone in the street. But this is what I understood then was the cause of this. He said, because there's twice as much money chasing the same amount of goods, then the price of everything doubles. So in effect, and this is what I was figuring out, in effect, they're stealing half the money that everybody has. And what they were using that money for was just beyond comprehension for me. As in my 20s, I couldn't even think of the horrors that were going on in the south of the country, what is now South Sudan. And the Darfur, even people who don't follow the news closely in the last 20 years, you'll know about those horrors, the refugee camps and that all as at that age was just too much for me. But on the plane on the way home, my brain started ticking about this inflation stuff. I could think about that without it hurting too much. And what I wondered, the question I asked myself was whether it would be possible one day to have a currency that wasn't controlled by governments and banks, and that they couldn't abuse the issuance of, that they couldn't steal from the population in that way. And that was then whirring in my brain. A few years later, around 2000, I came across public key cryptography for encrypting emails. That was exciting, the encryption side. But then the signing side interested me, that cryptography is also about signing things. And well, what if you could sign, you could create unique tokens? Well, would this be part of the answer for the people of Sudan and in similar places? Because by then I'd come across people in Argentina and various places. So I knew it wasn't just a problem for one place, that this is a common thing that happens. It wasn't in my experience in Europe, and I know the US and Australia, as Noel says, it's not an issue there, at least not to that extent. But where I'm not a technician. And it wasn't long before I realized that if Hollywood and the music industry can't stop people from copying films and songs, they're not going to be able to. No, we're not at a stage where we can stop people from copying coins. There needs to be something that wasn't there. And it turns out later that people had got as far as I had got. People a lot smarter than me had gotten as far as I'd got in the 80s, but they had got stuck at what I later learned was called the double spend problem. How do you stop someone from spending the same coin twice? So when I happened to be late at night at work in 2012, browsing around the internet, and this thing, Bitcoin, turned up, I got goosebumps because I realized straight away that I knew what the use case was straight away. I recognized someone has solved this problem. It's here. And I just got involved straight away because it was so exciting to me. So that was my moment with Bitcoin. I recognized it for what it was, and I thought I got to get involved. So we'll talk about no, sorry, I've done that bit already. I went backwards. So my thinking was that to get it into as many hands as possible, not for this one currency to take over all other currencies, but if enough of a population of a country have some and can use this currency, then it allows the population to hold the governments and central banks to account. Because if these governments don't issue their money responsibly, if they act in a way that steals the money from their population, then the people have another option. So for me, this is where the reserve option comes in, as in not reserve currency that central banks hold in their banks. That's not what's of interest to me. What's interesting to me is that it is in so many hands, in the ordinary people, that we can hold central banks and governments where it's required. If they're behaving responsibly, it's not an issue. But if they're not, we have the means to hold them to account. So that's what it was exciting. That was what was exciting to me. And that brings us back to the question of how to get it into the hands of as many people as possible. And the answer, as far as I'm concerned, is to be using it as money. That people want to spend it and people want to earn Bitcoin Cash. So the focus of Satoshi, the pseudonymous person who came up with Bitcoin, was on its use as money on the internet to allow payments between people without having to depend on cards and banks. And for that, Bitcoin Cash simply works. There's also a whole plethora of amazing things a good digital cash can do that neither physical cash nor bank accounts can do. But for me, since the beginning, one of the big attractions was to see if people would take it from me as payment for the things I want and need to buy in person from cafes and shops. And 13 years later, landing in the Isle of Man since 2 months, that remains something I want to do, and is why I'm wanting to introduce islanders to Bitcoin Cash, to see if you folks, once you start understanding and having a go at using it, will want to have the ordinary use of Bitcoin Cash as money to be normal for you, between you, within the community. But before we get into that, the idea that you and I, Jeremy, had back in the day, and I would say of a large proportion of the people in the space, in Bitcoin back then, of using Bitcoin cryptocurrency as money, the vision of thousands or millions of people making day-to-day transactions with it, didn't come to be, at least in these last 12 years or so since I was involved. Something like, but we're not going to go into that now. So maybe, Jeremy, for those who want to look into maybe why that didn't happen, what would you recommend?
Yes, well, of course, like you say, Bitcoin has now been around for 17 years, since 2009, and you and I have been involved for well over a decade at this point, and perhaps our early plans didn't come to fruition either as fast or as directly as we maybe envisioned, and that is its own grand story arc. So for people who are interested in digging into that, of course, all the Bitcoin Cash podcast resources have information scattered about all over the place, but we specifically have episode 85, which you can go and listen to perhaps after you finish listening to this episode, which is where I dig into with Jet the history of how things went wrong along the way, what was working, what wasn't, the basic background of Bitcoin and some other similar fundamentals. So that will really help you get up to speed with what's the podcast about, what's Bitcoin Cash about, and a lot of the information that will help you make sense of what Gareth is talking about here from a more broader perspective, rather than just focused on this specific adoption initiative. So maybe check that out if you're curious to learn more. But that's outside of the scope of what we're doing today. We're on a mission today, so we're just going to stick to that.
Yep. And whatever the reason that you can find out about, the Bitcoin most people know today, BTC, is now seen as digital gold, a store of value. And honestly, the whole crypto space, including Bitcoin Cash, is mostly used for speculation right now. Whether we might want it to be or aspire for it to be different, crypto turned into one gigantic zero-sum game casino. And of course, as with traditional casino circuits, where there's big money, gambling, comes grift and fraud. So if that's your impression of crypto, of what you know of it, gambling, grifts, speculation, you're not far wrong. But that's not what it was created for, which brings us to Bitcoin Cash, because the Bitcoin Cash community has kept that original ethos, has kept that guiding light, that compass north of peer-to-peer electronic cash for the world, basically money, but money that we control, or to a certain extent that none of us controls. The dedication, the intent, and all the work that has gone into improving and building on Bitcoin Cash over the years has all been with that in mind. Cryptocurrency had and still has a massive value proposition for society, the potential to improve the lives of millions, if not billions. And although I am biased, out of all of the thousands of cryptos that are out there today, I see BCH, Bitcoin Cash, as having by far the best chance of being the one to deliver on that promise. Jeremy?
Yeah, well, I totally agree. I mean, we're on the same page, and that's really the ethos of the Bitcoin Cash community, is that it is a cash. It's called a cryptocurrency for a reason, right? A currency has to flow. That's where the word comes from, like an electric or an aquatic current, right? So it needs people to be both receiving it, which they are ideally earning, as you do with any other currency, British pounds or euros or anything. People earn it and then they spend it. And that's the whole point of a cryptocurrency. But for a variety of reasons, which is, more covered in other materials on the podcast, people have become heavily diverted from that, and they see cryptocurrency as less of a currency and more of an asset, as something that they can hold like gold reserves or maybe like their stock portfolio or something like that. But even though that is an element to it, it's true that you can invest in cryptocurrency. You can buy and hold it for the long term. You could consider it maybe part of your retirement savings or part of your financial, maneuverings in different elements. That's not the primary element that it is meant for. Of course, people have got on the wrong track. So it's part of the mission of the Bitcoin Cash community to try and help educate people to bring it back to those core principles of sovereignty and transactability, which comes from people taking responsibility for themselves, that they feel they do want to have an alternative currency, whether it's just for a time of crisis or whether it's a daily usage option for them, doesn't matter. But to have that kind of organic, grassroots, community-driven alternative, people need to take responsibility for looking after their own money and not outsource things to banks or to other financial institutions that maybe once started with good intentions but slowly erode into having their own separate interests, which are often at odds with their customers or clients. So the key phrase that the Bitcoin Cash community always says, which has been a big part of Bitcoin history, is from Andreas Antonopoulos in 2013, which is not your keys, not your coins. And we'll go into more detail about that as well. But just we're going to return to it several times, not your keys, not your coins. And we'll explain what that means shortly. So Gareth?
I'm just getting a message through from Jet that the purely peer drop hasn't happened for some reason. So I'll come back to that in a minute. But I want to keep the thread here, because what we're talking about here is quite important. Because how most people keep crypto and how most crypto is kept these days is in accounts, even financial instruments like ETFs. And a few days ago, someone I was talking to, as a first assumption, believed the first thing he would need to do to accept BCH is to set up an account. But it's not the case. You just need a BCH wallet app. And there are many to choose from. You could even access the same wallet from multiple apps. It's your money. It's not tied to any one app or any one service. So when you want to receive Bitcoin Cash from someone, they just need an address your wallet app creates for you, and they can send you BCH directly over the Bitcoin Cash network between sender and receiver. No accounts, no banks or companies, just simply me to you, you to me. That's what the peer-to-peer in P2P cash means. So as it happens, well, it's no coincidence, given Jeremy is one of the most prolific and active advocates of Bitcoin Cash with so many Bitcoin Cash related projects. One of the easiest wallets to get started with is one Jeremy is co-founder of, Selene Wallet. If we have time at the end, we'll do a screen share, but I kind of think we've eaten into that time already and walk through the setting up. But it's straightforward enough. You shouldn't need it. But for now, Jeremy, would you give those new to this a rundown of what someone needs to do to start using Selene Wallet?
Yes. So Selene Wallet is an open source, non-custodial BCH wallet app. So what that means is that it's a piece of software. It's just an app on your phone, similar, although different in some important ways to you might be familiar with your online banking app. That's kind of the idea. But in our case, it's open source. We publish the full source code online so that anybody can review it for security errors and make sure there's no way for us to be in control of your money, that you truly are in control of your money. And it's non-custodial. So like Gareth says, it's not an account. There's no registration or sign up. We don't hold any information about you. You can think of it more as like a web browser. When you want to go on the internet, you go to a web browser and that lets you access any kind of web pages you want, right? And that same web browser can be used to go to any different site, and you can switch to another web browser and still use all the same websites that you were using before. It's the same thing with Bitcoin Cash and wallets. So Selene is one wallet, but there are other wallets like Paytaka or like Cash and Eyes, which you can access the same tools and services just like you do with Selene. So you're not locked into being part of the Selene, ecosystem in any way. So to use it, all you need to do is go on the Google Play Store or the iOS App Store and search Selene Wallet, Selene Wallet. You'll see it's got this nice logo here with the moon and the green Bitcoin Cash B, and download it. It's a very small app, very quick to download, and of course it's completely free. And then as soon as you load it up and open it, you'll notice that you land on a screen which looks like this, and the biggest thing there is the QR code to receive funds. So if you're trying to transact BCH with someone else, they will be able to scan your phone screen using the scan button at the bottom center, and then it will register that address, that account, not account. It will register that address, and you can just instantly send money to it straight away. There's no sign up. You don't have to put in any personally identifying information, nothing. You're straight onto the network as soon as you open that homepage. Now, if you want to transact with somebody who you're not standing right next to, you can also do it online, of course, by which you can send them a screenshot of that QR code, and you can hide your balance using the little eye icon in the top left if you don't want them to know how much Bitcoin Cash you have. Or you can send them a string of characters. You can send them this address just below in characters, numbers, and letters, and you just tap that and it will copy it onto your clipboard, and you could send it to somebody on WhatsApp or Telegram or any other messaging app, Instagram, whatever you want. And then they will be able to copy that and press the send button in their app, and they will be able to send directly to transactions on BCH. Essentially instant. They cost almost nothing, just fractions of a penny, so little that you won't even notice it. And that's the basics, really, of sending and receiving. We also have Selene available in your web browser, so you don't even need to download an app. You can just go to app.selene.cash in your web browser, and it'll load up a fresh wallet for you right there, so you can even try it out and have a bit of a look around without downloading the app first, if that makes you more comfortable. And the only main thing you need to know is to write down your seed phrase, which is we will be covering with the whole not your keys, not your coins. So in Selene, if you go into settings, and then you can choose wallet at the top, and then there's a little info panel, and you can find your keys. So the key is that it's 12 words in English, which you need to save as a backup, because since you did not have an account, you didn't register, you didn't sign up anywhere, you need a way to recover your funds if your phone gets lost or stolen or it goes missing somehow. And that's what the seed phrase is. As long as you have the seed phrase, you will be able to recover your money on Selene wallet on another device or in any other Bitcoin Cash wallet. But it's absolutely critical that you save those 12 words in the exact order that they're written somewhere physical and not digital, because humans are much better at protecting physical information than they are digital information. People get hacked and scammed all the time using online services, and especially when it's new technology. So get a piece of paper and write down those 12 words that are written there and store it wherever you store other important physical information. Like people usually have a place for their passport or their wills or other, their university degrees or other important physical documents. So once you've written down the words and put them there, you're backed up and you're safe. And if you ever lose your phone or have any other problem, you will be able to recover the money with those words. But it's also critical that you do not tell anybody else those words, because if you do, they can load it up into an app themselves and take your money. Like I said, there's no other, registration or sign-in details. So just be very careful not to tell anybody else those words and keep them safe. That's the main thing.
Yeah, and that it's an interesting one, because with bank apps and with everything else, there's always someone to turn to, and usually there's someone to say, "Oh, even sometimes if you've been defrauded, the bank will cover it. But this is decentralized. There isn't anyone to go running to. It's not a bank. There's no customer service. That's the trade-off for the freedom. But what there is a wallet producer, and they're very supportive.